Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the Gemini portable display, which is a 12.5-inch display that you can plug into a laptop, a smartphone, a tablet, other devices to sort of have something that you can use on the go as a secondary screen or a larger screen or both. It's a device that's up for pre-order through a Kickstarter campaign as of the time that I'm shooting this video in early February of 2019. Should be shipping in May. And this particular model has a 1080p touchscreen display. As you can probably see here, it's a matte screen, meaning it's not glossy and doesn't show as much glare as some other screens. There's also a 4K version. And full retail pricing is supposed to be about $299 for the 1080p version and $499 for the 4K version. They're going for lower than that during the crowdfunding campaign. It's generated a lot of interest, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a relatively compact screen. It's got a 12.5-inch display, measures around 13.5 by 9 by about 0.4 inches. This is a prototype or sort of early demo unit that was sent to me for testing purposes. It doesn't quite meet the specifications. It's a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier than what's listed on the Kickstarter campaign. I don't know how much of that will change or won't, but it weighs about 2.6 pounds. It's supposed to weigh about 2 pounds. Either way, though, it's still relatively compact for a device that you can take with you and use as a secondary screen. And it's got a built-in battery, so it can run for, in my tests, around 3.5 hours at a time without necessarily needing to plug into an external power source. If you do need to plug in, the unit that I was sent comes with this power adapter. It's a 12-volt 12-volt 3-amp power adapter. I believe due to hitting a stretch goal during the campaign, it should come with a USB Type-C power adapter instead. This version has two mini HDMI ports, 2 micro USB ports, and a USB Type-C port, plus that power jack. I'm under the impression that you might get full-size HDMI ports on the full retail version, again, having hit a crowdfunding goal. We also have a headset jack here and a bunch of buttons, and you'll notice that there's stereo speakers here on the left and right sides. The speakers aren't great, but when you plug in via HDMI, you can hear on the speakers. The kickstand here is got a little sort of flap that you can pull to open it, and it goes up to 180 degrees. So you can actually lie it almost all the way flat like this, or at a variety of different angles. I find anything past, I don't know, about 120 or so tends to make it do that. But if you sort of go to a 90-degree angle or less, you can prop it up at sort of whatever is comfortable for you. And you've also got labels here on the back that show you we've got plus, minus, power, settings, and input source, and then, of course, the headphone jack there. On the other side, you can see that we've also got labels to go along with the ports. And speaking of labels, I was sent this with a remote control, which seems to work just fine, but the labels are all in Chinese. Again, I don't know if that's something that'll be addressed on the retail versions or not. And it uses a coin cell battery here that comes included. All right, so it's kind of tough to do a review of a screen without turning it on. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like when you plug it in. So I'm going to bring over a laptop here. And you notice I've got a bunch of different cables running here. The demo unit that was sent to me came with a full-sized HDMI cable, even though there's no full HDMI ports on this. But fortunately, I had this HDMI to mini HDMI adapter, so I'm going to go ahead and plug that in here. And that's really all I need to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and press and hold the power button. Turns on the screen. And there you go. You can see we've got the mirrored displays here. Just sort of see if I can get this out of the way a little bit. So I'm using Windows 10 here. It should work with Mac or Linux or anything else that supports multiple displays. The touchscreen doesn't work out of the box, though, if you're just using HDMI. So fortunately, I've got a USB Type-C port here. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug USB-C to USB-C. And now we've got support for touch input. And a little bit more of a mess of cables. So let's go ahead and just sort of pull that through, stick it behind here. Now, if I wanted to, I could also plug in the power supply, but I don't necessarily need to at this point because these two things are working well together. If you do take a look over here on the side, you'll see we've got a little notification light. that shows us that something's connected. If we look at the other side, you can see we've got a couple of little status indicators showing us how much battery life we've got. Unfortunately, that's the only place where you're going to see those battery indicators. So if you're just going ahead and using the laptop, you'll see sort of the laptop battery over here, but you won't see anything separately telling you that your screen is about to die. So the company that makes this says it should last for up to 5 hours. In my usage, I'm finding more like 3.5 hours. But what you might want to do is sort of peek from time to time over at the side so you can keep an eye on these status meters and see how much battery life you've got. When using this unplugged, not only does the screen get about 3.5 hours, but I've been using it, right now it's plugged into an Acer laptop, but when I use it with my HP laptop that normally gets around 6 to 8 hours of battery life, I get about half of that when I plug in the monitor. Not because the monitor is drawing power from the battery, but because the battery just runs down more quickly when it's powering two displays. So that's something that you definitely want to keep in mind. Right now I've got it set up so that it is mirroring the screens. You see the same thing on both displays, but of course, one of the things that you might most commonly want to do is extend the display. And that's pretty easy to do in Windows. Again, you should be able to do it in other operating systems as well. And now when I move a cursor from one side to the other, or I can move items from one side to the other. So we can sort of use it as a dual display setup. So for instance, say I wanted to open a web browser in one window and then watch a video in the other window. That would be something that I could do. I could edit documents on one while watching videos on the other.
Display, Celeron N4100 processor, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, and
just turn that off. So we've got a video playing on one screen, we've got this happening on the other. And then if I wanted to, I could sort of pause with the touchscreen. Speaking of touchscreen, something else that I could do here if I wanted to is, say, open games. So I went ahead and installed a pretty simple touchscreen game here. We've got a little Flappy Bird. Just drag that over here. Play, tap. And of course, being Flappy Bird is not exactly easy to play. You probably heard that we do have audio coming out of the speakers here. For the most part, they're sort of what you expect from like cheap laptop speakers. They're not super loud. There's not a lot of bass. You might be better off just using whatever speakers your laptop has. But if you're plugging it into something smaller, then it might be nice to have that option for external speakers. So speaking of something smaller, let's go ahead and take a look at, for instance, the GPD Micro PC here. Let's go ahead and just log in. And let's go ahead and do this all over again, this time with a tinier computer. So HDMI port goes in, USB Type-C port goes in, and now we've still got touch, we've still got the ability to extend the displays, but now what we've got is, in addition to just sort of having two screens, we've got a much bigger screen. So I'm using this portable device, but then I could, if I wanted to, have access to a larger screen for watching videos or doing other things. Say you're viewing a presentation, you have this pocket-sized computer that you can take with you, and then you just throw this in your backpack and you can show your presentations, or you can do them back to back. So, you know, I'm looking at the presentation on this one and other people in the room can see on the other side. So I can envision a number of situations where it might make sense to have this sort of multi-device setup. The fact that it's got multiple inputs is nice. The fact that it's got multiple, that it's got a built-in battery is nice. The fact that you can sort of easily switch between inputs. So right now it's an auto select, but I could say go to USB Type-C, HDMI, or the other HDMI. Auto tends to work best for me because I don't have a USB Type-C cable that's capable of working here, but if you have the correct adapter, that would work. These micro USB ports here that we have on the side, if you wanted to, you could use them to plug in other devices. I have, when not using the touchscreen, been able to plug my phone in using the USB Type-C adapter, and I can charge my phone from the battery in here. I could plug in a USB flash drive or something else, but I might need an adapter because, again, we don't have these full-size ports. Another thing that you might want to do is try out switching the screen orientation. So that's something might be a little bit hard to show because I'm not sure it'll stay in the frame on this camera, but if I wanted to, I could, let's see, identify display, So we're on number 2. So let's say for screen number 2, switch to portrait and keep changes. And now I've got instead of a 1920 by 1080 pixel display, I've got a 1080 by 1920 pixel display. So let's go ahead and pick this up, and you can see what's happening there. Let's go ahead and minimize that. So there we go. Now the tricky thing about doing portrait orientation is you no longer have a lot of control over how it's standing. You can't adjust the kickstand, for instance. It's basically 90 degrees or bust in this situation. But it might be good for if you wanted to read documents or other things that are going to make more sense in this orientation. If you did switch back to landscape, on the other hand, let's go back to this and say landscape, keep. Then we do have that option of adjusting so that it's more comfortable depending on how you're using it. So if I wanted to, for instance, play a game, I could, I don't know, use the controls here, open the game, and then play it on this display. So that's just one of the many different ways that you could choose to use this display. So overall, it's a pretty nice addition to a toolkit. At $299 and up, I'm not entirely sure that it's going to make sense for everybody. I will say that, again, since it weighs about 2.6 pounds, and I have a laptop that weighs around 2.8 pounds, throwing them both in my bag means I'm carrying twice as much stuff. And then once you add things like power adapters, then that's going to make it even more heavy and bulky. This demo unit that I was sent also did not come with a case of any sort, so I have to be pretty careful about putting it into my bag and making sure that it's protected. Due to the crowdfunding stretch goals, it is supposed to ship with a carrying case for end users, so hopefully that won't be as much of an issue. Another thing that I noticed is on this demo unit that I was sent, let's just go ahead and unplug it here and I'll show you something, which is sort of a little bit of, I don't know, rust maybe on the metal hinges. This is a demo unit, but I wasn't warned that there would be this problem. I'm hopeful that it's not something that affects end users. And again, the size and weight are not exactly what I was expecting. And in terms of build quality, you can see there's a little bit of sort of give in the case itself. Hopefully these are all resolved by the time it ships to end users. But again, this is an early prototype, and I can only sort of tell you what I'm seeing. You can see that the status indicator here when nothing is plugged in switched from blue to red. If I go ahead and plug in a couple of things again, switches to blue to tell you that it's on. And we've still got 4 bars here, so we haven't really been using it long enough for that to run down. I guess the last thing I should probably show you, I already showed you the input switch settings, but there are also a couple of other buttons here that we can use to adjust the volume or other settings. Now it's a little bit sort of tricky to remember which buttons do what, but you can navigate through them using the plus and minus buttons to adjust a whole bunch of different things, including the aspect ratio, overscan, display, gamma, temperature, and so forth. And sort of the obvious ones like the backlight brightness and contrast. So that's a quick look at the settings and the general feature set of the Gemini portable display. You can find more details at liliputing.com or check out the description to this video on YouTube for a link to the website, as well as a link to the Kickstarter campaign. It's up for pre-order until about February 18th, I believe, through Kickstarter, and after that there may be other ways to purchase it, but it's not supposed to ship to backers of the campaign until May, and it should be available at retail sometime around then as well for about $2.99 and up. Early backers of the Kickstarter campaign sort of lucked out because they might have been able to score one for as little as $1.59, and at that point I think it's a really pretty great buy. For $2.99 and up, it's a little bit more more judgment involved, I think. This is Brad Linder with Liliputing.